Hey guys, today I wanted to show you a build that I've been working on for most of this league. It is far from optimized, but I have managed to use it to do all the content actually for me for the first time. So all the major map bosses are down, the atlas is pretty much complete except for stuff like Doriani's, and I've done half of the Maven invites, but I think the harder ones are probably beyond this build unless you have some major investment. So this build is it's a Voltaxic burst Trickster that, okay, this is a bit of like, it's a Voltaxic burst Trickster that actually doesn't move, but instead just uses Frostblink for mobility. So I'm going to just quickly show you guys what this looks like in a delve, and then we can go over gear and the gems. So it starts a little slow because we really do want frenzy charges to start moving a lot faster, and I'll explain why later. But you can see that this build maps very quickly, especially in high density mob layouts. Doorways can be a little bit annoying, but I mean, it's not a problem. The mapping experience requires you to hold down 3 buttons, but once you hold down the buttons, you don't really need to do anything else. So it is simultaneously a 3-button build and also a low APM build, because all you do is you hold down Voltaxic Burst, Frostblink, and you also hold down Vortex, and that's basically it. So yeah, I'm just going to quickly finish this off. You can see that the clear, especially in Delve, is fantastic because Voltaxic Burst has built-in explode. And the explosion value is really high. So it means stuff like Delve, Harvest as well, Breach, Expedition. Expedition is really good with this build. Just everything just explodes, and logbooks can be run with, like, you don't really need to worry about the mods on logbooks as long as you stay away from stuff like Chaos Immunity, and obviously you can't stack too much spell block chance because it's a spell. So anyway, that's what the build looks like. And I'm going to go back to the hideout and talk about gearing. Alright, let's talk gear. So I'm going to cover the uniques first. The build hinges around 2 uniques basically, the Stampede and Badge of the Brotherhood. So Badge of the Brotherhood is the method by which we gain max frenzy charges by instead stacking max power charges and then converting those to frenzy charges. The important mod here is the increased cooldown recovery rate of travel skills per frenzy charge. This, you really do want to divine this to the correct number because there are only 4 things you can roll, and for every 1% you get here, that's an extra 10% cooldown recovery rate. So it's very impactful. You can actually see that actually turns the cooldown of Frostblink from 1 second, which is already pretty decent, to 0.72 seconds. And it means that even if you're not hitting any mobs, your mobility is still pretty good. That's also due to the Stampede. For Anoints, I anoint Flipfoot to get more cooldown recovery rate and overcharge for 1 extra power charge. On the Precursor's Emblem, the only important mod that you really want to go for here is 50% chance if you gain frenzy charges, you instead gain maximum frenzy charges, and that's because this build struggles a little bit with generating frenzy charges. Anything else you can get here is a bonus, so just go for that. We also have 2 void batteries because we do have Badge of the Brotherhood, so yeah, that kind of goes without saying. For jewels, we have a really cheap Watcher's Eye. It's just a 2 mod, and it's mainly there for defenses. We are an evasion-based build, and this gets us very close to the evasion cap, if not actually to the evasion cap, depending on how many frenzy charges we have and whether or not we have our flask on or not. Hits taken as lightning is handy. We do have +2 lightning res, so this is a small little bonus. For the other 2 unique jewels, we have a Forbidden Flame and Flesh combo. We anoint Unstable Infusion, which gives us +1 maximum power charge and an extra source of power charge gain, which we don't actually need. This is really just for the maximum power charges. Now, there are 2 other options for this. you can go for more damage and take deadly infusion. That gives you more crit chance, more crit multi, but you lose the power charge, which means you lose a bit of mobility. But it is more damage. Alternatively, you can go the defensive option and get Mistwalker, which gives you elusive on crit and increase, and you take no damage from crits while elusive. This is really nice because it means that we use the other mod from Badge of the Brotherhood, which increases the effect of elusive on us. All in all, the uniques don't cost very much. These are just standard void batteries with nothing too crazy happening to them. The precursors is not too expensive because that frenzy charge mod isn't specific to the expensive frenzy ring. I forget which one it's called. Badge is actually quite cheap this league because everyone is going crazy about crystallized omni-essence and ashes of the stars. I think this is only like 60 chaos at the moment. The Stampede cost me, I think, 80 chaos or so. You do pay a premium for the perfectly rolled mod. For rares, my rares are pretty scuffed. Generally, the suffixes are pretty crap. What you're looking for in general are energy shield and as much resistances as you can get. For the helmet, you do want the enchant. It gives quite a bit of extra damage. So this one you'll probably have to craft yourself. I just bought the gloves and I just bought the belt. The belt specifically, you want energy shield and you want resistances, but you also do want increased cooldown recovery rate. This one specifically, you can actually try and craft yourself if you buy a Crusader belt, and then you roll like any energy shield mod and like any 2 resistance mods. You can then craft the veiled mod for increased cooldown recovery, and then you can try a Reforge more likely to see if you can hit the higher tier mod, the 16 to 20%. It's worth going for, but I just bought it. For the chest, it's a bit different. We are using Escape Artist, and because we're using Escape Artist, we want an evasion chest instead of an energy shield chest. So we also want a way of generating frenzy charges. So I went for the cheapest option, which is just the synthesized base. The other options you have are a Pharaoh's Fur, which is quite expensive and also doesn't give as much evasion rating, so you get less benefit out of Escape Artist. It's also more expensive. You can also Woke Orb a Shaper and a Redeemer chest together, and that puts that spell crit plus frenzy charge on hit gain, and that will get you a really nice set of suffixes, and then you can just lock suffixes, reforge defenses until you get something you're happy with. What's nice about that is that you can do this on an eye level 86 base instead of being stuck with an eye level 83 base, which means you can roll more evasion rating. Tier 2 evasion is eye level 84, and tier 1 evasion is eye level 86. So this chest is a little bit gimped. Another option you have is to go for frenzy charges on hit on the Precursor's emblem. In fact, you can really juice this thing up if you get +1 power charges, but at this point, like, we're talking like a lot more exalts that I'm willing to spend. Finally, what you can do is you can use an Elegant Hubris Timeless Jewel. And for this, what you would do is everything to the left of this Charge Mastery wheel, all of these nodes, you unallocate them, and you instead spec down to this Energy Shield wheel, and put the Elegant Hubris here. Then you need to divine the Elegant Hubris until you hit Frenzy Charge on hit, either on this node, or this node. Once you hit that, you have a chance that this keystone is actually useful, because if you roll, I forget what it's called, I think it's Supreme Ostination, the one where your life flasks also recover energy shield. If you can hit that, that's another really good source of energy shield recovery that this build struggles a little bit with. So keep that in mind, because I think it's probably the second best option if you don't want to spend a huge amount of currency crafting your double influence chest. Yeah, the ring is just resistances and some stats. The strength is not so important. The dex definitely is. You absolutely need to have 197 dex just to use the Zodiac Leather. In terms of gems, I have Vortex linked to Arcane Surge for a bit of extra damage. Temporal Rift is really nice for getting out of tricky situations. If you Frostblink into a dead end, instead of having to Frostblink back out, you can just Temporal Rift back out. But the main benefit of using this is this build struggles with energy shield recovery, which is why that timeless dual tech is actually really nice if you can hit it. The main reason for that is because we use Ghost Reaver, we can't recharge our energy shield, and we don't have that much recovery, we have like 2%. So while we're leeching, it's not a problem, but the moment we stop leeching, and then if we run into a degen or we take a hit, we have no way to recover that unless we use Temporal Rift. So Temporal Rift is a nice sort of get out of jail free card on top of just making mapping a little bit more comfortable by being able to get out of a dead end. In the helmet, we have a Purity of Elements, and this is mainly because of two reasons. Firstly, I'm a bit lazy, and secondly, I don't have a lot of resist because I haven't really rolled my helmet and my glove very well. Whoops. You can see this is like T5 Fire Res, T6 Lightning Res, and then here it's like T6 Lightning Res, and this is like T8 Cold Res. So there's not a lot of resistances to go around on this build, and this lets me cap resistances and also not have to worry about elemental elements. If you do get around that issue, like cap your resistances without this, you can go into the Pantheon, finish off Puruna so you get freeze immunity, and you can probably get away with then using a Zealot for more damage. So keep that in mind. Sigil of Power is nice against bosses that don't move a lot, but you don't get to use this a huge amount of time, so your mileage may vary. It's a nice boost when it does get up, especially when you get to the maximum number of stages. Grace is just because we're an evasion build. Discipline, self-explanatory. Assassin's Mark is the curse of choice because our Voltaxic Burst does 3 different types of damage. It does Chaos, Lightning, and Cold. Instead of investing into Elemental or Chaos penetration, I'm like, it's just not going to happen, and so I went for crit instead. This does mean your damage suffers quite a lot more against Cyrus because he has a lot of resistances, but Cyrus is still doable, even if he is a bit uncomfortable. So, yeah. Winter Orb is just there to generate Frenzy Charges and Power Charges. This is the Anomalous Voltaxic Burst setup. We use Anomalous Voltaxic Burst because we don't care about the duration of Voltaxic Burst, and having slightly more duration synergizes nicely with the Enchant. The Enchant is the one that gives the most damage. Instead of going for 40% increased damage, this one outperforms it because the duration of Voltaxic Burst is, I think, 3 point something. It's just 3 seconds exactly. So this gives 90% increased damage as opposed to the 40% that you can get on the other alternative enchant. And we link it to Power Charge on crit, Anomalous Spell Echo, Inspiration, Ice Bite because we're stacking Frenzy Charges, and increased crit damage. So nothing too crazy here. We're just looking for big more multipliers on our main link. On the gloves, we have our cast more damage taken setup, linked to Immortal Call and Hydrosphere and increased duration. Hydrosphere is actually one of the few ways we reduce resistances. We get a bit of exposure for cold and lightning damage, so it's nice to have. The strength is, this is where the strength is bottlenecked. Increased duration and cast when damage taken, increased duration and Immortal Call are what really restrict this. And finally, you have your Frostblink setup. So this is just Frostblink linked to Bone Chill for a bit more damage, increased area of effect, and this lets you get more cooldown reduction if you can hit more mobs. And finally, Culling Strike, and this is mainly for bosses. Now, there is an argument for using a level 3 Empower if that makes you hit the next cooldown reduction breakpoint on Frostblink. And what that does is it lowers the base cooldown of Frostblink by 0.05 seconds. Currently, it doesn't do anything for me, I don't think, but definitely check it out, because if you only use this build to map, then the Culling Strike is not necessary. Right, the Flasks are not anything too crazy. I rolled Specialists prefixes so that I can get some uptime against bosses. It's still not 100% uptime, but it's something. Aziri's Promise is like 8% more damage, so it's nice. And this is this definitely gets you to evasion cap by a significant amount, so it's nice to have. This Flask is a bit sad. It's basically how I get rid of bleeding and corrupted blood stacks. Yeah, I know you can get corrupted blood immunity on the tree, but there's nothing really for bleed, so I just have this. It's yeah. So that's the gear. If you want to improve the gear, obviously you can look for the I think the best version of this chest is to go for the double influence chest, and for the helmet you can actually go for the +1 power charges, and obviously you can go for +1 power charges on the rings as well, either on the precursors or getting a synthesized base, but that's very expensive at that point. All in all, like the void batteries don't cost much. This costs like 80 chaos. This costs like 60 chaos. I think the helmet and the gloves cost an exalt each. Maybe a little bit more for the helmet just for crafting it. The belt costs 2 exalts. The chest was like 10 chaos. And then 4.5 exalts 6-link kit. The ring, I bought the base for 10 chaos and then just threw a few dense fossils. Funnily enough, I hit attributes instead of defenses, but I'll take it, you know. And then the Watcher's Eye was like 30 chaos, and the Forbidden Flame Flesh combo was about 80 chaos. So it's a very cheap build, at least to get off the ground. I don't really know about min-maxing it because it's not really something I like to do in Path of Exile. So yeah, build's pretty. It's actually not too expensive to get off the ground. So mapping, as I already talked about, is quite comfortable. You basically just blink in straight lines. You definitely want to go for maps that are linear, such as Strand, or Beach, or Silo. You can see that I've got them as my favorite maps. The big open maps like Summit or Dry Sea aren't too bad. It's just, I don't like them because I don't really know where to go. And enclosed maps with like really thin doorways and doors that you need to open, they're a bit more annoying, but still perfectly doable with the build. So that's stuff like dungeon, burial chambers, and cells. When it comes to bossing, you can do all of the map bosses without much difficulty. I think there are a few that come up with like some really hefty physical degens that you need to be a bit worried about. So definitely, like, there are some that are a bit problematic, but most of them are not a problem. Searing Exarch and the mini bosses are deathless. The Infinite Hunger is actually quite funny. What you can do with this boss fight is, you wonder, you can just Frostblink straight to the end and completely ignore the islands because you don't worry about the reduced movement speed. You just Frostblink, right? So the Infinite Hunger specifically is actually a funny boss fight to do. So that's nice. Yeah, I mean, you will die to the one-shot mechanics of the Eater of Worlds and the Searing Exarch. You can tank like one of them Ace Balls, but I don't think you can tank two. And if you're tanking that's user at that point. And against Eater of Worlds, there's nothing really that you need to watch out for. I don't think he can one-shot you from full health with as long as you have your Ghost Shreds up. So both of the new big bosses aren't too bad. So yeah. The Shaper and Elder are quite easy as long as they're not Maven Influence. With Maven Influence, Shaper can get a bit gnarly, like you might die a few times, but definitely still doable as long as you use all of your portals. But no, they're very easy. Uber Elder is where things start to get a bit hairy. So the build struggles with degens in general, but also moving degens. So the Shaper Balls are actually a problem, the ones that follow you and drop the degens. The Shaper fight is actually fine because you don't need to move very often, and so when you do, you can be judicious about where you Frostblink to, and that means you don't really care where the Shaper Balls drop. They just drop where they do, and you just avoid them for the rest of the fight. Against Elder, he just kind of dies really quickly, so it's not a problem. But against Uber Elder, the fight lasts for a lot longer, both degens and both bosses, and sometimes they're both invulnerable. So at that point, the Shaper Balls start to add up, and the fact that you can't move more than once every 0.72 seconds becomes a little bit more of an issue. It's still a fight that you can do. I did it on my first go, like completely, like I've never done it before, but I did have to use pretty much all my portals. So definitely nowhere near as comfortable as as Shaper and Elder on their own. Cyrus is very annoying. Again, he has those moving degen beams on the last phase, and his die beam starts to rotate on the last phase. That's a problem because if you don't position your Frostblink nicely, you will get clipped by like the last die beam, and he also blinks around a lot and it's quite hard to track. So it's not enjoyable, it's not comfortable, but doable. I did it on my first go again. For Cyrus specifically, what you want to do is you want to remove the Watcher's Eye and replace it with the Corrupted Blood immunity jewel, and also swap out Grace for a Zealotry, because Grace is useless against, Evasion is useless against Cyrus, which is another problem with the Cyrus fight. Maven is very, very difficult, I think partially because the boss fight is generally quite hard, but also because you have to deal with the Shaper Balls, except now they have more AoE, and you also have to deal with moving degen beams. So, yeah, I had to take multiple goes to kill Maven. When I did kill Maven, I did have one portal left over, so definitely is doable, like, without having to have multiple goes at her. But it's just really difficult to be able to place the degen balls where you want to, just because of the fact that, like, if this is the only way you can move, it's hard to sort of, if you blink onto the ball, then you're stuck there for another 0.72 seconds until you can blink off it again. And if you stop DPSing to run around, you lose a lot of damage, because not only are you losing damage while you're running around trying to place the balls, you then lose another 3 seconds of DPS when you start charging up Voltaxic Burst again. So, you really don't want to stop, you really don't want to start moving. And the only boss that I actually move against is Veritania to dodge her Ice Spear barrage. Every other boss, you can get away with just cross blinking everywhere. Even stuff like Eradicator or Searing Exarch, you can actually just keep blinking behind them, and you can dodge their rain of projectiles enough that you can leech through the rest. So yeah, Maven is definitely not comfortable, but still doable, because, you know, I've done it. One thing that you can do for the Maven fight is on the brain phase, if you have melee bosses, if you drag them towards the brain and then kill them there, the explosion from Voltaxic Burst will actually come very close to just one-shotting the boss. So that's a great way to sort of make the brain phase go very quickly if you high roll and get melee bosses. If you get range bosses, you can't do that, or it's a lot harder to do that, so don't bother. Damage-wise, the build comes out to around 2 million DPS. Even though that's a fairly low number, you have quite a lot of DPS uptime against most bosses in the game. It's a very low APM build. Like, all you have to do is just press Q, W, and E. And against most bosses, all you have to do is wait until they start an attack, and then you Frostblink behind them. And then you wait until they start an attack, and then you Frostblink behind them. And this is just how you boss. You just do this. And it really only starts to fall apart on, like, the last phase of Cyrus, on, like, the last phase of Maven, and against Uber Elder. Every other boss, you can just do this, and it's very easy. Like, it's actually like brain dead bossing. So even though the damage isn't very high, the bossing is fairly comfortable, even if it does take a little bit longer to kill compared to, like, your 10 million DPS builds. So, yeah, like, the at least you have a lot of damage uptime, is all I'm saying. So, I think that's pretty much it. I will go over quickly, again, recap the upsides and downsides. So, downsides is this build sucks against degen, especially when you can't leech. It hates moving dots, because it means that you have to be very careful with where you Frostblink to. Shaper balls are a huge problem, and you don't like enemies that don't care about evasion. So Cyrus is a problem, and Maven is kind of annoying as well. This is mainly because we don't have a lot of spell suppression. We have 29 spell suppression. So against a few moderate hits, it's fine. We have Ghost Shrouds that can carry us. But against lots of small hits, or one big hit, especially Fizz hits, this build is it's going to struggle there. However, the benefits are that it has high damage uptime against most bosses and contents. Explosions mean that you have very good mapping, and against lucrative content like Harvest, you can basically one-shot a lot of plots, and you're very good against expeditions and logbooks as well. And in high density areas, your mobility is very high. So that's it. Defenses are pretty much entirely just Ghost Shrouds and 95% evasion. So you're good against attacks, but not so good against spells. So I think that's basically it. I guess if you did wonder if this build can be done in hardcore, Most definitely.